How's it going, fellas? My name is Andy, and in this video, we're gonna take a look at Michael Malloy, the man who was supposed to be murdered over 10 different times, but he just never died. I'm not gonna lie, that's really impressive. The story goes back to 1932 in the Bronx. Michael Malloy was actually from Ireland, a former firefighter, but unfortunately, a series of bad decisions led him to become homeless. In the years leading up to this story, Malloy was homeless and wandering the streets of New York. Eventually, around the summer of 1932, he went to a bar and became friends with a couple of people. But little did he know, those couple of people had some terrible intentions. And Malloy was not aware of it because he was always just that kind of person, kind of aloof and not really caring about what's going on. So those guys plotted a scheme to take out life insurance policies on Malloy. They agreed to take out a total of 3 policies, so in the case that he dies within a certain time frame, the group of guys would get about $3,576 in profit, which back then was a lot of money. Well, even today it's still a lot of money depending on who you talk to. The 2 guys in charge of this whole operation were Francis Pasqua and Tony Marino, and they basically set this whole thing up and told some other guys in on this plan what they should be doing. They pretty much wanted to murder Malloy, but try to pass it off as an accidental death, so they can all get the life insurance money. Anyway, the guys befriended Malloy and they became drinking buddies. Nobody really knew anything about Malloy's personal history though. He didn't have any family or any children, which was also another reason why they thought they could get away with this whole plot. Francis Pasqua and Tony Marino recruited a couple of other guys to get in on this plot and promised to compensate them with a share of the profits. Alright, so the first murder attempt was relatively simple. They all knew Malloy was a heavy drinker and they wanted to kill him through alcohol consumption. Marino led him to a bar where he gave him an open-ended tab and let him drink as much as he wanted. So you can probably guess what happened. Malloy spent the entire day at the bar drinking. He was downing shot after shot to the point where he could not even lift up his arm. But the thing is, he was still fine. He didn't pass out or anything. After he was done, he said thank you to the host and then walked away. And he even said that he'd be back the next day to drink even more. Now obviously, Marino and the other guys were kinda shocked and pissed off, since the alcohol seemingly had no effect on Malloy whatsoever. After about 3 or 4 days of non-stop drinking, Malloy was still perfectly fine. He had trouble walking a little bit, but that's basically it. So the first attempt failed. But then the guys had another plan. Their second murder attempt was to replace Malloy's shots of gin and whiskey with wood alcohol. For those who don't know what wood alcohol is, basically it's poisonous and a very small amount can cause blindness or death. So they replaced his whiskey with wood alcohol, and yet nothing changed at all. Malloy kept drinking shot after shot of wood alcohol now, and he was still feeling fine. According to a witness at the bar, Malloy collapsed for a few hours, but then he got back up and continued to ask for more. Man, that's ridiculous and pretty funny at the same time. The third attempt was trying to get Malloy to eat oysters soaked in alcohol, or something like that, hoping that he would die from indigestion. But it didn't work either, and Malloy ate every single oyster on his plate and washed them down with more wood alcohol. It's getting ridiculous at this point, and everyone was getting very impatient. All the guys were, spending a ton of money just trying to kill him, but nothing was working. Now, for the fourth attempt, another bartender named Joseph Murphy had his own idea. He made a mixture of rotten sardines with some metal shrapnel and put it in a sandwich, hoping that Malloy would eat it and the metal pieces would cut his organs. Of course, that didn't work either. At this point, everyone was in awe of this unkillable man. What else can they do? Obviously, they still have to pass it off as an accidental death, so they can't just take out a gun and shoot him. So one of the guys in charge, Marino, actually had experience with this whole life insurance scheme before. Marino actually killed a homeless woman a few years prior and successfully passed it off as an accidental death and claimed her insurance money. So he tried to use the same technique on Malloy this time. The fifth murder attempt was to knock him unconscious, then drag him to the park in the snow with his clothes off and basically ice him down. That didn't work either. Malloy woke up the next day and walked back to Murphy's place, but he did say he felt a little bit cold. Attempt number, I guess 6 through 10. Run him over with a car. The group convinced a cab driver to help them, and since back then, there was a lot of people who would do anything for money, so the cab driver accepted the offer. They all packed into his small car and gave him instructions on how to run him over. Long story short, the first time failed because they were scared and people were watching, and the other 2 times, Malloy had insanely fast reflexes and jumped out of the way. However, attempt number 10, they drove over 50 miles per hour and hit him directly. They didn't have time to check his body though, but I mean, it was a direct hit at 50 miles per hour. That should kill him, right? They didn't know though since they all fled the scene and they waited a couple of weeks, but there was nothing on the news about anyone dying from a car accident. Marino, Pasqua, Murphy, they were all confused on what was going on. What happened to Malloy? Did his body just vanish? Well, it turns out he survived. He was in the hospital with a couple of broken bones, and when the guys went to visit him, he said, "I sure am dying for a drink." So after a few more months of waiting for Malloy to heal up, they finally got him, unfortunately. On February 21st, 1933, the crew gave it one last shot. They basically went into Malloy's room when he was sleeping and they shoved a hose that was connected to the gas jet into Malloy's mouth. Then they tied him up and turned on the gas jet. He died approximately an hour later. And apparently, Pasqua was friends with the guy who filed Malloy's death certificate, so he wrote that the cause of death was pneumonia. Anyway, Pasqua and Marino went to collect the life insurance money, but because it took so long for Malloy to die, they only received $800 total to split among like 5 people. Eventually though, the police realized what happened and started to get involved. They launched a full-scale investigation of everyone involved in Malloy's attempted murders, and they labeled that group as the Murder Trust. The whole investigation made the front page of the news. Everyone knew about it at this point. And then a couple months later, 4 of those guys were arrested, including the main conspirators, Pasqua, Marino, and Murphy. They were found guilty of first-degree murder and sentenced to death by electric chair. And that's all, folks. Michael Malloy's legacy lives on. His story became very well known, and he was referenced in many different TV shows and books throughout the last few decades. So what did we learn from all this? Well, for one, back in those days, it seemed like a ton of people and organizations were kinda corrupt. I mean, you have a guy trying to convince other people to help kill someone just to get a cut of the insurance money. Then at the same time, you have others falsifying death certificates, and then the life insurance guys are okay with it. I don't know, it was pretty crazy. I guess it depends on the area too. The Bronx around that time wasn't exactly the greatest place to live. Thanks everyone for watching. I hope y'all enjoyed that video. If you did, it'd be cool if you could leave a thumbs up and subscribe for more in the future. I'll see you next time. Peace.